Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the DawgLand podcast. I am your host, Jackson McCurry. While these recent episodes, we've been breaking down the roster and all the position groups, but it's mid-February. I think it's time we start talking some draft here on the podcast. And usually we're talking about it in late December, early January. But when the Browns go to the playoffs, it's like push the draft content back. But we are bringing it to you now. My guest on today's episode, he dropped his big board and his first mock draft earlier or last week, and wanted to get him on, talk about it, start talking about the draft. He is our draft guy over at the DawgLand, and he's a good, close, personal friend of mine. He also hosts the After Further Review podcast, which you should definitely go check out. It's Alex Hale. Alex, what's going on, man?
Oh my God. Wait, are we talking draft for the first time in February? Wait, it's not December, it's not January, it's February, right?
It
Like
is.
what?
It's hard to believe, man.
Wow, 2020 did a number on all of us. I mean, it's pushing back Browns draft talk. I mean, the world is just going, it's on fire. The world's literally on fire. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, I mean, there's times like Anthony was like, maybe we should talk a little draft. And I'm like, nah, let's push it back. I said, the Browns are good. Like, the Browns are good. I don't want to talk about the draft. A couple years ago, I made it a point. Don't talk about it during the season unless we are super bad. Cause like I got sick of like week one of the season. Oh, well, who are we going to take in April's draft? And it mentally drained me. And I'm just so thankful like February is when we can start talking about the draft like first thing.
That's what you have me for, to do it for you during those months.
Yes, and we're thankful for you. Our whole team with the DawgLand is so good. We have such a great unit together, and I think we're pumping
Awesome
out some
team.
great content. Oh, for sure. But like I said, you dropped your big board last week. You dropped your first mock draft. Let's jump right into the mock draft. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, my biggest takeaway was the trades. And I even
Yes.
when we put it out on Twitter, I said there is three blockbuster trades, but really it was just one mega three team trade. So let's start off with there. When you go into this, a lot of mock drafts don't do the trade talks and stuff. And I kind of told you at first, don't do it. But then I was like, I took the leash off. I said, Alex, go crazy. And you did so with this mega three team trade.
Yeah.
So talk about it for the people that haven't looked at your mock yet.
So, okay, I want to say something for the record, though. Any trade I make, I have to deem it as logical, that it could happen in real life. That I'm not just going to make a trade to make a trade. If I put 5 trades in my mock, which has happened before, I think I've done 7 once years ago. I legitimately have to convince myself, at least, it makes sense that these teams have a need, that the possibility is there, and the player is there for them to go get. So we're talking about Houston, the Jets, and the Bears. Now, the Bears could have been substituted with the Colts. It came to be a toss-up. I decided Chicago for the fun of it. Also because I don't know who else they're going to get to be their quarterback next year. So I'm like, this is probably their best chance to get a legitimate quarterback. So the trade is the Deshaun Watson trade. It's finally happening. So the deal is number 2, number 20, because the Jets are acquiring 20 from the Bears straight up for Sam Darnold. So it's a separate deal that I'm going to say gets made maybe in April in this hypothetical world. They also give up 23, which they got from Seattle in the Jamal Adams trade. Plus, they give up a third-round pick, plus a 2022 first and a 2023 first for Deshaun Watson. Now, I know what everyone's saying. Wait a minute. They gave up 5 first-round picks. Well, you can thank Matthew Stafford for that, because now they gave up a starting quarterback. It doesn't matter if Jared Goff is top 15 or not in the league. He is a starting quarterback that you can go with. In my eyes, that's worth a first-round pick. That's 3 first-round picks Detroit got, in my eyes, for Matthew Stafford. Deshaun Watson is far better and younger than Stafford. That's 2 more first-round picks, plus the third-round pick as well, because Houston wants draft capital. So in this trade, I convinced myself that if there was ever going to be a Deshaun Watson deal, this is it. This is the one deal that can be pulled off that Houston, even though they're saying Deshaun Watson's going to play next year, which I don't buy, this is the one deal that makes too much sense. That if all the pieces came together, it's a done deal. Like, Deshaun Watson will be a New York Jet.
Yeah, this trade actually, it makes so much sense, and I'm glad that you were also logical and you didn't like make it some outrageous trade offer, and you benefited every team. Houston's able to rebuild, get a new quarterback. The Jets get their franchise guy, Deshaun Watson. They can start building around him, even though they just, mortgage the future. They do have some solid pieces there already, and they'll continue to put pieces around Watson. And, Chicago, like you said, who knows who they're going to be able to get at quarterback. They have did they have the 20th pick before this?
The 20th pick, yes.
Okay, so could they draft theoretically a Mac Jones? Maybe they got to move up for him. Who knows who they could get veteran wise? Like, this makes sense. You get Darnold, it buys Nagy and Pace one more year to at least get something right, gives Darnold a fresh new start. It makes sense on all levels. And I like this trade because it benefits every team, and you were also logical and putting everybody in a good spot.
Yeah, and that's the key with making mocks. The one rule I have is I can go crazy because you're never going to get a mock 100% right. So why don't you just have fun with it? Why not just say, hey, I'm going to be wrong. But at least if I'm going to be wrong, I'm going to present an argument or a case to you that maybe Mel Kiper Jr., because Mel Kiper says, I don't want to do trades. Well, then your mock drafts become repetitive and boring. So that's why it's like every mock draft is not the same. It's a different scenario every time. Does it mean I will put this in the next mock? If I really do think this is going to happen, I might do it just because chaos. But the more and more I looked at this trade, I was like, this is the one deal. The only other team that has even remotely the capital to do this is Miami, which I considered, and I almost pulled the trigger on. But at the end of the day, when I thought about it, it's like Houston may walk away with, Justin Fields, which is not a bad consolation prize. And at the end of the day, he's still top 10 player on my board. He's number 7. But at the same time, it's like, I think they want the choice of Wilson or Fields and not having to make that decision just like, oh, it's Fields or Wilson. You want one or the other, and you're the one that makes that choice. So that's why I went with the Jets over the Dolphins.
Since we're on the subject of quarterbacks, you have 5 going in the top 14. The one that I have a question about, because, I've seen Trevor Lawrence. He's obviously the can't miss, and I actually have a question that we'll get to after this one I'm going to bring up. Zach Wilson was great at BYU. Justin Fields, obviously there's question marks there, but he's talented. And then Trey Lance. But the one guy I have questions on is Mac Jones. Now, he had a great year at Alabama. People look at him as the 5th best quarterback in this draft. I have my doubts about him. Obviously, the track record of Alabama quarterback speaks for itself, but you can't say, oh, you don't want to draft those guys, because if you look at the school's history, they don't produce talented quarterbacks in recent history. Same can be said for Ohio State. But when you watch Mac Jones, Alex, do you think he's a product of the talent around him, or do you think he is talented? He obviously needs some more work, but you could see where a couple years down the line, he could be a top quarterback / franchise quarterback in this league.
I don't see franchise QB in him. I'll be perfectly honest. Do I see a solid starting quarterback like a Kirk Cousins? Yes, I actually do see that. His first year, he had his moments where he flashed, and he had more talent arguably then than he did this past year. And this past year, he took like a major jump that I never saw coming. He was placing the ball very well. He managed that offense brilliantly, and he loses arguably his best wide receiver. I know people are going to say, wait, isn't that Devontae Smith? You could have made an argument it was Jalen Waddle going into the year. You lose Waddle, and you don't even miss a beat. Like, it takes not just Devontae Smith being arguably the best route running wide receiver we've seen the last decade to get open. It takes a quarterback getting the ball to him. Do I think it's a product of the system? Sure. I think you can make the case that a lot of QBs are a product of their system. Baker Mayfield, product of the system. Kyler Murray at Oklahoma, those guys are products of those systems. It's about how they translate. I think Mac Jones is more polished than most quarterbacks coming out. Do I think he's got a high ceiling? No, but I think he has a low floor, which is going to be very intriguing to a lot of teams. Like, I mocked him to the Vikings. The Vikings could sit there with Kirk Cousins and say, Kirk, you got one more year, and they'll figure out his cap situation later, and they'll develop Mac Jones and maybe not miss a beat once they let go of Kirk Cousins. So I like Mac. I don't think he's special. I will say the one quarterback in this class I really do not like is Kyle Trask, but that's another story for another day. I think Kyle Trask is a bust. I do not like him. Makes too many bad throws, bad decisions. Just Mac Jones knows how to manage the game, and he has a pretty good arm too to hit Waddle and Smith the way he does downfield. You got to have an arm to hit those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I have my doubts about Mac, but I mean, if he turns into a solid starter like a Kirk Cousins, I don't think that's worth the risk of a first round pick, because we've seen what Kirk Cousins does. We know his flaws, but he's still a good quarterback. I would put him in the top half, probably. Maybe.
I mean, the one thing I'll say is, and this is going to be a factor all teams are considering going into next year, there is a huge question mark on the talent level of the QBs next year. I am not a Spencer Rattler fan. I think he is absurdly good talent. I don't think the mental game is there. I just don't think it is. I forget the kid's name out of North Carolina. Great talent, but he really hasn't stood out to me yet. He hasn't done anything super special. So I think you're going to see movement on the QBs like a Mac Jones going a lot higher, because teams are already seeing next year's class at QB especially is very poor. So that's something that everyone's got to consider once the draft gets here.
Yeah, and I mean, with all the veteran quarterbacks available this offseason, it wouldn't hurt for a guy like Trey Lance or Jones or maybe even a Zach Wilson, depending on where he lands, or a Fields, if these guys could sit. Because there's so many veterans available, that a team that's interested in them wants to pick up a veteran and say, hey, you're going to sit behind this guy for a year, and then in 2022, you're the guy. You're the guy going forward. You listen to Patrick Mahomes talk about what it meant for him to sit a year behind Alex Smith. I think it did wonders for him. I think if he would have been anywhere else in 2017 where he had been drafted, let's just say the Cleveland Browns, for instance, I don't think Patrick Mahomes would be what he is today, one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the game.
No.
Him being able to sit behind Alex Smith for a year did wonders for him, because he was able to learn about the things that he didn't get to learn in college, or wasn't able to learn, or wasn't told to learn. Like, the one thing I heard on a podcast was Mahomes didn't know how to identify a Mike linebacker, which is crazy knowing how good Patrick Mahomes is now. But that year under a veteran quarterback did wonders for him. And some of these guys that you might not think are ready to play from day one, be able to sit behind a veteran, I think can do wonders for him. I mean, there is the rare occurrences. Baker only sat a couple games behind Tyrod Taylor. Same for Justin Herbert. But and those guys were able to have great rookie years. Some guys get thrown to the fire early, and it ruins their confidence.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I think Trey Lance is the one guy in this QB class that needs to sit and learn. He only played one game this year. He looked mediocre. He played very strong down the stretch. I loved his leadership there. But you really didn't get to see a lot of Trey Lance. And I wonder how that's going to affect him, going forward. So I think he just that's the one guy that definitely needs to sit and learn behind Jared Goff in this scenario, or behind whoever, and just learn an offense, learn the nuances of the game, and just get better over time.
Without a doubt. I would agree with you on Lance, just because, one game this past season, like, I think there's still a lot to that he can be molded into as a quarterback. And I think sitting behind a guy like Jared Goff, when you have him mocked 7th to Detroit, I think that's a perfect landing spot, because, Jared Goff, they're saying he's the future, but I also don't think like he's the guaranteed future there in Detroit. Like, I feel
He's
like
definitely not.
no, yeah. So I think Lance would be a perfect quarterback for them. And that would be a perfect spot for him too, to be able to sit and learn for at least a year, maybe 2 years, until Goff's guaranteed money clears up. It could be a great spot for Lance. Alex, I don't know if I've asked you this before. How long have you been breaking down draft prospects?
Wow. I did my first mock when I was in college. That was 2009. I did my first one. I kind of just did it on websites for fun. I didn't take it seriously. 2012 was the first year when I did the Sports Genius show back in the days of Cleveland Talk Sports, which that site no longer exists. I actually had started in February with my show, and for 2 months, I went headlong into the whole quarterback debate. I was anti Brandon Weeden. I remember we did our draft party. I knew it was going to happen, and I didn't want to. I was fine with the Trent Richardson pick. Didn't like moving up, but I remember at 22, David DeCastro was on the board, and this is how long I've been doing this. I am yelling on air, "Get David DeCastro! He shouldn't be there. He's a top 10 player on my board. Don't let him go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh will nab him." And we take Brandon Weeden, and man, I wish there was audio of that rant. I went ballistic because I said Weeden would have been there in the second round, you idiots. Worst case, you could have taken Nick Foles, Brock Osweiler, or Russell Wilson. And I kept saying, Russell Wilson fit the Mike Holmgren scheme. I was like, if you want someone who fits what Holmgren wants to do, take Russell Wilson. He fits. And no, took Brandon Williams. So I've been doing it for, God, we're approaching 10 years. Jesus, I'm insane.
So going back that far, because of my Trevor Lawrence question, where does he rank among the quarterbacks from, say, 2012 on? Is he a tie with Andrew Luck? Is he above Andrew Luck? Is he second? Like, how would you rank Lawrence among the quarterbacks since 2012 coming out of the draft?
So my number one quarterback I've ever scouted since 2012 is Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is number one, and it's not even close. I watched that Texas Tech film, and the ball placement, just his footwork, his arm, everything, it was jaw-dropping. And I just was like, this is the best QB prospect I've ever seen. Andrew Luck is up there. He's right there at 2 because I felt Andrew Luck was polished, and he had a good arm. He had good mobility. He had everything you wanted. And Baker is right there at 3. Trevor Lawrence, for me, man, like his arm, he never has thrown in a game a pass for more than 60 yards yet. It's not that he can't. I think he can. But I think it's just there's that question of in game. but that's not the biggest question in the world. Let's be perfectly real here. Lawrence for me ranks right there with Baker Mayfield as one of the best quarterbacks I've ever scouted. So I think it's a tie right there with Baker. The reason why I love Baker, and you're going to hear this word a lot whenever I talk about QBs, ball placement. Can you place the ball where no one else is going to get it except your receiver? Baker in college, especially that last year, was unreal. He could put it in the window, put it right on the receiver's fingertips. Like, I thought he was a machine doing it. So I look at accuracy. I look at footwork. And Lawrence's is very smooth. He's very calm in the pocket, very poised, and he has more athletic ability. So maybe I might put him slightly ahead of Baker, simply because he can do more than Baker can, and he's got the better size, but I don't think that really matters anymore. But I think in terms of what he can do, especially like running around, I think Lawrence is probably number 3.
Okay. Wait, you said size doesn't matter? I thought they had to be 6'5" with a rocket arm to throw, for example, against the winds of Lake Erie.
Yeah, Tony Grossi and I had a long discussion about that when we talked about Baker Mayfield. I told him, you clearly didn't watch any Oklahoma games because that kid can throw a rocket, and he can. So I think Grossi finally has eaten his own words, though. So enough on him.
I was seriously hope so. I looked at your big board, and then I'm looking at the mock, and the one thing that popped out to me, before we start talking about, potential options for the Browns, was you have Devontae Smith as the top ranked wide receiver. But then when I go to your mock draft, you have Jamar Chase being the first wide receiver off the board. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So, one, I don't trust the Eagles to make the right pick. That's plain and simple what it is. But more importantly, I think in terms of what the Eagles want to do, I think they want a more physical wide receiver, not the route running speed guy that Smith is. And I think it's so close between the two. Again, Jamar Chase opted out. And going into the year, he was by far the best wide receiver in this draft. It wasn't even close. Now, people can argue, well, Devontae Smith came out of nowhere and, well, he did it all on his own, which I honestly think that's a great thing. But anyways, some teams may say, well, what does it mean for, Chase that he didn't play? Like, does it mean that he's not as good as Smith? Are we going to overlook what he did with Joe Burrow? I don't think you can. I think some teams, because of lack of film and, just going off projections, they may look at Chase and say, well, he doesn't have another year on his legs. So maybe we'll just go with Jamar Chase instead. But I think he's more physical than he is speed. And I think that's what Philly needs right now. They have Jalen Reagor. He's a speed guy. Why are you going to have like 5 speed guys? You need some physical, tough wide receivers, which Jamar Chase, I've seen comparisons to Roddy White, which that fits what they need.
Interesting, because I've seen the back and forth. Some people have Smith rated higher, some people have Chase rated higher. Jamar Chase, it's like, I think it's just like, seeing what Devontae Smith did this past season, makes him a lot of people's top guy. But it's like, and Chase got forgotten. I think that's kind of how like people are going. But I feel like maybe once we get close to the draft, and you might even do the same, I feel like Chase will probably be back to being the number 1 wide receiver, because people will remember, hey, this guy was the top guy before the season. He opted out, and now everybody kind of focus their attention on Smith and even, Jalen Waddle, who you have as I think the 3rd wide receiver. And then I think people will go back to thinking Chase is the top guy once again.
Yeah, and I want to add, because people will read this and they'll say, where's Jalen Waddle? I said on the pod, I didn't know really where to put him in this because of the injury and just how he looked in the Ohio State game, I thought he looked like he was really hobbling on it. Like the injury is worse than expected. So I kind of want to keep Waddle, on that edge of being a first round pick, but he is a top 15 player on my board regardless. It's just, do teams buy that he's a first round pick right now with that injury?
Right. I mean, that's a fair question to ask. You, like you said, against Ohio State, like he made a couple impact plays, but that ankle was still bothering him. Like
Yep.
he didn't have to play, but he wanted to go out there and try to help his team win a national title, and he did that. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see once they have his pro day. Is he going to be 100%? And then how does he perform? And that will that change, scouts and personnel guys' mind? Like maybe we agree with Alex. Maybe we do think he is a top talent and he'll end up be going off the board before Kadarius Toney or Rondale Moore or Rashad Bateman, guys that you have in the first round over Waddle just because of the injury concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're sitting here. The Browns are 26th in the draft, which is like their lowest actual first round pick in a long time. They picked in the 20s, I think 07, 2014, 2012 because of trades. Now, I couldn't even tell you the last time the Browns picked this low. It had to have been the early 90s.
Jeff Fain.
Jeff Fain, 2003 off the wild card season. Yep. I think before that would have been, 94, 95 draft?
Probably Steve Everett.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time. I think right now they would go corner or edge rusher, depending what's on the board. Safety, I think, is in play. It's not going to be linebacker. Sorry, everybody that thinks we're going to draft a linebacker at 26. It's not going to happen. Alex,
unless if someone falls.
Okay, yeah. I mean, who do you have as your top linebacker? Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. You have him going 17 to Vegas. If he were to fall and the Browns are very high on him, I wouldn't think they would be just because of how they stand at linebacker. But if he were to fall, maybe he would be in play at 26. But Alex, in your first mock, talk about who you have the Browns taken, how he would fit on our, I'll just go ahead and say defense. And how do you feel about him as a prospect?
So I go with J.C. Horn, South Carolina. A cornerback, good in man coverage. I actually had him as a fringe top 15 guy. This guy will be perfect opposite Denzel Ward. He's taller. He's about 6'1". So he has that size you're looking for to be physical. I think he can be a little bit better on tackling, but he is a physical player. I mean, it's now starting to leak out some game film of how dominant he can be. I saw one the other day. I wish I would have retweeted it. But he looked outstanding in a few games. I mean, this guy can be a shutdown corner. And by the way, folks, this is the son of Saints' great wide receiver, Joe Horn. And I am very high on football IQ. The kid has grown up around the game. He has a very high football IQ from everything I've read. These are the kind of guys you want to build around and put opposite next to Denzel Ward. I'll be honest, I love Greedy Williams in terms of just him as a ball-hawking corner. I cannot trust him. He can't tackle. He couldn't do it his rookie year. And he gets injured too much. And he got burned a few times in his rookie year. I'm not saying like he can't develop. What I am saying is that I can't rely on Greedy Williams to be my number 2 corner. So I need to start looking for my number 2 corner. J.C. Horn is the third corner on my board. After that, it gets a little bit dicey on where everyone goes on the cornerback board. But I like him. I think now with Patrick Peterson being a free agent, I'm going to be open about this. There is no way on God's green earth in real life he's getting past 16 now. Like, this came out after I published. If I had known then, I probably would have changed the mock. But J.C. Horn is a dream fit for me. If you can get him, God, as a Browns fan, you got to be feeling really good about your team, especially when you're about to pay Denzel Ward and you got a stud corner on his rookie deal to make it all work.
Absolutely. Me and Jack Duffin talked about it when we broke down the cornerback room. You can't bank on Greedy Williams right now just because you don't know how the shoulder is going to be. You don't know if the nerve issues flare back up. Like, I think Greedy's talented, and I think, if he's healthy, he can play a role in this defense, but in no way can you bank on him to be the number 2 corner, and that shouldn't stop you from going after, like you said, a Patrick Peterson or a Richard Sherman in free agency, or looking at somebody in the draft. Like, obviously, the Browns aren't in range to get a Caleb Farley or a Patrick Surtain, but if Horn's there and he's as good as you're talking about and what other draft experts are talking about, if he were to be there at 26, I think that he would seriously have to be in play for the Browns, because cornerback is a need with or without Greedy Williams, because Terrence Mitchell's likely gone. Kevin Johnson didn't work out. Like, they need more cornerbacks. They need more secondary help. When you look at potential edge rusher guys, Gregory Rousseau and Jalen Phillips, Jalen Phillips out of Miami. I think Phillips could be there at 26. I wouldn't bank on it. You have Pay from Michigan at 16 going to Arizona. Is there another guy that's not on your first round mock, but you could see potentially sneaking into the late first that would make sense for the Cleveland Browns at terms of edge rusher?
God, I forgot the kid's name out of Penn State who I just read, but he's really intriguing, and I'm just starting to get into him now. Just reading up about him. Started out as a basketball player, now is playing edge for Penn State. Doesn't really have sacks numbers, but he was always in the backfield. I'm just starting to discover him. So he may sneak in later on. But I don't have the name. That's literally how green I am to this guy right now. I literally just discovered him 2 days ago. And the more I read, the more I'm like, I'm intrigued. The other one
Jason
is
Owa?
Yes,
Okay.
Owa.
I seen the name a couple days ago too.
Yeah, I literally have just discovered him, and now I'm like trying to spend a week on this guy, going like, okay, do I think he makes sense at 26? Because I'll say this right now. I already started mock 2.0. Like, it's a 4-week process to make these mocks work, and I try to lock them in and let everything else play out for about a month. But I'll get into that another day. But in terms of, other pass rushers, Joseph Osai out of Texas, he's been productive. I like that. He's athletic. He's talented. I can't go wrong with him, but I don't think he's special. Like, when it comes to a pass rusher here, it's not an overly talented pass rushing group. I honestly could make the case. I know he's not an edge rusher, but Zaven Collins is a good blitzer. You could make the case if you feel he could provide some kind of pass rush help. He could be the guy at 26, but I find it very unlikely they go linebacker, and he's more true linebacker than edge. The only other way I could see the Browns going is defensive tackle. And there are some guys there, but there's really, again, not a guy that I see worth taking at 26, which brings me to my big point. Realistically, the Browns are probably going to trade down. And honestly, it's not a bad thing. It's honestly the right thing to do depending on how the board falls. If you can't get, and I'm just going to name a couple of guys here, if you can't get J.C. Horn, if you can't get a Owosu Koromora or Paye or any of those guys, it may be in your best interest to trade down. I know some people on Twitter say, well, they should take a wide receiver and take Kadarius Toney. I mean, I love Kadarius Toney, but I can find you probably 3 other wide receivers later in the draft that are just as talented as him. So I honestly would trade down. In the scenario you're bringing up, I'll call a team that wants to move up, and I'll make that happen.
Yeah, I think trade down is very much in the cards. Especially like you said, if there's a guy that the Browns know that they can move down and get, if they can slide back to, the early 30s or, even into the second round, if they can grab some extra picks, I don't think it would hurt. Especially if they feel like, oh, we can slide down, 6 or 7 spots, pick up some extra day 2 picks, and still get the guy we want. I think it makes sense. And it
Yep.
also, it helps financially as, we're cutting thin on salary cap space. Guys are needing to get money, moving down a couple slots and saving. I think that would be MO for Barry and DePodesta for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think the meat of this draft is in that second round. If you can collect picks and target guys like Melifonwu or Jabril Cox, or in the third round, I'm eyeing Basham out of Wake Forest. These are guys that, like, you're looking in those mid rounds that are talented, but also productive in college, which are things that if we look towards the Sashi drafts, which pretty much point to what this front office will look like in terms of drafting and what they did last year, there are 2 things they look, well, 3 things. Age, if you're younger, that's better. 2, athletic ability. And 3, believe it or not, they look at production. And if you can do all 3, you're a perfect fit. If you can do 1 or 2 of those things, you might be a guy they're still looking at. And there are a bunch of those guys in the second and third rounds that they can get, let's say, hypothetically, I don't know, let's say the Patriots in this mock panic and give up a second round this year, a third, and maybe they give up a future third as well to move up to 26 and take Kyle Trask because they're panicking at quarterback. Well, now the Browns would be like in the mid 40s, along with their, like, I think it's like 57 they own as well. So you're sitting at like 46, 57. And oh, by the way, you have 3 third rounders. So now it's like, oh, we've got all this ammunition. So either we can trade and get a guy we want, or B, oh, we'll just draft 5 guys and rebuild our team. Easy as that.
One final question for me. Safety is another position I think the Browns could look at. You don't have a safety going in the first round. If I'm double checking, you don't.
Nope, not yet.
Do you think there is a first round safety worthy of or is there a safety worthy of going in the first round? Do you think this is a position the Browns need to address early in the draft, or do you think they are going to go in with the mindset Delpit's going to be ready? Because I think much like Greedy, I wouldn't bank on Delpit right now. And even with Ronnie Harrison, as good as he was last year, he was injured a lot too.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is another position that the Browns need to focus on adding to instead of just settling with Delpit and Harrison going into 2021.
So to kind of give you an idea of how my mocks work and how much they change, the first Browns pick was a safety. His name is Trayvon Moehrig out of TCU. Very much a ball hawk, center field safety. Willing tackler, athletic, very smart player. I like him a lot. I really had him. I had him for the longest time stuck at 26. And at the last minute, I made a change, and it allowed J.C. Horn to fall. It was the Colts, because J.C. Horn was originally going to be the Colts pick, because I know they need another corner. But it changed when Anthony Costanzo retired. So I decided, okay, they're going to take a left tackle here. And I couldn't find a spot where J.C. Horn would go. Maybe Houston looking back, but I don't think they would pull the trigger on that. And the more and more I thought about it, that's why I went with Horn. But Trayvon Moehrig was right there for about 3 weeks of this entire process. And he is a guy that if the Browns decide they need a safety, I think he will be there at 26. My only concern is 25 because the Jaguars could take him. They need another safety because they traded theirs to us. So they could go Moehrig. If he makes it to 26, I think you very much have to consider him. Because if you trade down, there is a chance, depending on what team. I mean, the Saints make a lot of sense for Moehrig too. That he won't be there if you were to even trade down to the low 30s. So that's a guy definitely to keep an eye on as the weeks go by. See how he does in his pro days, his 40 time, all that stuff. Again, 40 times don't determine anything for me. It's just more of, can you keep up with the speed of wide receivers today? In fact, more than anything, I look at their shuttle times. So that's how I view safeties and corners in 40 times. I got to tell you, this year it's so hard to evaluate anyone. Like, you know me as well as anyone, Jack. In terms of wideouts, that's the position I love to scout. I can't watch the gauntlet drill this year. Do you know how heartbroken I am, Jack? Like, I have like a list of the past 3 years of the players who aced the gauntlet drill, who passed and who failed. And by the way, if you ever want to know who had the best gauntlet drill I ever saw, Chris Godwin. That was a perfect cone drill when he came out. Loved it. And you can't see some of that stuff. So I will say there are first-round talents that we're not talking about simply because we're not going to be able to see them this time. It's going to be so weird, this whole process, because everything is just throwing dirt at the wall and seeing what sticks. I mean, that's kind of where I'm even at in scouting. Like, film tells you a lot, and I'm not going to say it doesn't, but there are just certain things that in the draft process you find out through drills and shuttle times, and yes, sometimes the 40, that you're not going to get. You're just going to see the number. You're not going to see what it looks like. For me, I want to know if he's around a 40, does he pull his hamstring like John Ross does when he runs a 4.22? How does he decelerate after it? If he's running at top speed, is he setting himself up to be injured with the way he slows down? I mean, there's so many things we don't even talk about in terms of that I keep tabs on that we just aren't going to see. And it's a shame, but I will say it makes this job so much more interesting this time around, because probably not going to be as right as I normally am. So now it's like, I want to see how good I can get it right.
Yeah, this year's so fascinating because there isn't going to be a combine. I know one of the I think it's Exos. They're doing like a mock combine at their training facility. There's a lot of focus on the pro days. We just saw Trevor Lawrence's pro day this past Friday as of this recording. Last year we had the combine, and then like a week later the world shut down, and that made the draft process weird. This year is going to be, I mean, probably about the same, except there's no combine, so teams really aren't getting to do, the one-on-one interviews. They have to do it via Zoom. The medicals, I don't know how they're going about that. The drug testing, which obviously always plays a key factor in for some prospects.
Tests.
Yeah, the IQ test, Jabril Peppers, Antonio Callaway. You guys failed your IQ test in Indy a couple years ago. But like, it's just going to be so interesting to see how teams are going about this. The Browns, they've been doing practically everything virtually already. So, maybe they're one step ahead of the game, could be a step back because they're not traveling as much to these pro days. I don't know how much they traveled during the college season last year, but I mean, it's going to be a key test for a lot of these teams to see are they going to be willing to take a risk on guys, even though they don't get to be as hands-on as they usually are? And just seeing how every team's going to go about this, because it's another unique year where all the resources aren't available at their disposal, and you're just going to have to see who is going to approach, how they're going to approach it, and how the draft's going to unfold.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a fun time. I mean, like, as I said in the big board, I'm not even bothering again with the big board. I'm going to make that disclaimer right now, because I'm not going to be able to see the process. I'm only going by film, and I've seen enough film. Like, in terms of the top 15 and really the top 30 guys, I've seen enough. Like, there is nothing more that I'm going to find on the tape that tells me anything different. Like, the only players that I could see jumping into this would be like a Rashad Bateman or a Kadarius Toney, pretty much because they either blow me away with athletic drills, or B, more importantly, they wow me in the gauntlet. So no, there's no big board 2.0. That big board is set in stone. In terms of what teams are going to do, like, you're starting to see like the emphasis on trades for the quarterbacks, simply because number one, there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, but number two, because this whole process is now super simplified and watered down because of the times we live in, these teams that could invest the time in bringing a Mac Jones, a Kyle Trask, a Trey Lance into their building, they can't do that anymore. They are only going to know the quarterback so much. So you're asking the question, am I willing to trade future assets for a guy I really haven't met with, over trading assets or spending money on a guy who's been in the league, let's say hypothetically, Washington. Washington's a team that I know is going to try to move up. But let's say they can't really meet with the Trey Lance, but they know Ryan Fitzpatrick can hold down the fort and run their offense very effectively and make them a playoff contender. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. This is kind of the world we're living in right now, where it's different from other years, where teams would invest more in the draft process, where now it's looking like they're investing more in the proven free agent trade market than the draft, because the whole thing's a shit show.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, like, especially with the quarterback position, if I'm a team that needs one, I'm going the veteran stopgap. And then if you still want to draft one, then you're just like, yeah, you're sitting, because, the process, it's not like other years where we can get our hands on you. We had to do everything virtually. We saw you at a pro day. Well, that's great. Johnny Manziel had a great pro day. But we're gonna set you behind this veteran for a year. We're gonna mold you into what we want you to be. And you'll learn behind the veteran. And then 2022, we're taking the reins off you, and then we're going to see what you got. I think that's how, unless you're Jacksonville and you're getting Trevor Lawrence, I mean, if any one of these other quarterbacks, they all got question marks, I would stick them behind a veteran for the year.
Yep. And I think that's something you're going to see. I think Jameis Winston will end up getting a starting nod somewhere because of all this, which is crazy to think. But that's the way the world is right now. And just with the amount of teams that need quarterbacks, that's the way it is.
Absolutely. I'm so fascinated to see how that's going to shake out, how the draft process is going to shake out. Alex, great stuff with the big board, with the first mock. Looking forward to seeing mock draft 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0 as we get closer to draft time. It's only about 2 months away.
75 days.
75
baby.
days. 75 days of this recording. But it's in Cleveland this year, and hopefully we're able to attend. I'm making that the goal. Yeah. I'll
Jack,
mask up if I have to.
I'll mask up too, but like Jack, I have wanted this my entire life. Like
Oh yeah.
I've been trying to go since 2012. Like I remember there were like these lotteries online that I would sign up for every year just to get a ticket. And I don't think I've ever told anyone this. I actually won one year for which one was it? I think it was Philly. And I actually got tickets for day 2 of no, it was Chicago. It was Chicago. I was gonna take the train and try to stay with my brother. It was day 2. I got tickets to the NFL draft and I couldn't go because I couldn't make it work. So I'm like, gosh darn it, I really need it in Cleveland. I mean, I've already told work, like, if the draft is that day, I ain't coming in. Like, I'm sorry. That is an off day for me. I'm going to the draft. This has been a childhood dream. I mean, I remember my first NFL draft. It was the 2002 draft when we drafted William Green. I remember that. I have always wanted to go to this. I'm going to wear my Clown Goodell Barstool shirt. Bring it on, Roger. I know what you are, so I'm just going to wear and have the whole world to show you what you are, a clown. And I'm going to have a great freaking time at the NFL draft. Hopefully, I'll be fully vaccinated by then. Who knows?
I will be fully vaccinated because I'm getting the vaccination later this week, the second dose. But my plan is, and hopefully Cleveland allows it, we're at draft day or draft weekend, whatever day.
I'll meet you there.
Oh yeah. It's like 2 years ago when they announced it, like we were talking about, going up there, meeting other people, Stephen Thomas, I'm sure would come into town. Anthony, like me and Anthony have never met. And I feel like draft weekend would be like the perfect opportunity to finally meet.
We're going to get the DawgLand together there. Like
yes.
Everybody, you want to, the entire staff at DawgLand. Like, I don't know where y'all are. Like, I don't care where y'all are. You're fine the way here.
We'll have to fly Jack Duffin in.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, you want to know what? Fly in, darn it. It only happens once every God knows how many years.
Right. Who knows when Cleveland will get the draft again, but hopefully it'll be a fun experience and something we'll remember for a long time. You guys can check out Alex's big board and his mock draft over at thedawgland.com. Alex, go ahead and plug your Twitter, plug your podcast, and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah, follow me at DCLE Sports Guy. Follow After Further Reviews. Subscribe to it on iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff. Got a nice show coming up this week. It's going to be our From the Land podcast series. First guest is going to be Caitlin Marshall. Can't wait for that one. And I don't want to spoil too much, but as of today, we're actually going to start slowly going to wrestling. And I'm probably booking a former wrestling legend to be interviewed. And all I will say is, if you know anything about this wrestler, it is all controversy. And anytime he does an interview, it is epic. Like, I don't know how I was able to pull this off, but we're in talks to make it happen. And it sounds like it's going to happen. So cannot wait. So follow After Further Review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you can listen to podcasts. Subscribe, leave a rating, give it 5 stars because it's awesome. So thanks, guys.
I'm definitely looking forward to that interview for sure. You can follow me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. Check out the DawgLand at the DawgLand on Twitter, at the DawgLand on Facebook. And as we get on out of here, until next time, Browns fans, go Browns.
Go Browns.